Let's talk a little bit about OpenAI because OpenAI seems to be in a race to own the operating system of work. So, what am I talking about here? Well, you may have seen the headlines. OpenAI have already launched Frontier. And although it may sound a little bit like a Patagonia sub brand or a mid tier venture fund, don't let that distract you. This is one of the more important strategic moves in enterprise tech. So here's the short version. OpenAI is no longer just trying to win the chatbot war. It's trying to own, as I said, the operating system of work. It's a bigger prize. Software, is it dead? Long live the systems. But for 30 years or more, enterprise software has followed pretty much the same playbook. You built an app, you wrapped it in some decent UI, you charge a per seat model. We're all familiar with those. And, you hope and you pray that the customers don't switch away from you to something else. The interface was actually the product itself. The frontier flips that model on its head a little bit. So instead of humans, you and I, operating software, software is sort of operating itself, or more precisely, agents do. These agents can access systems, they can execute workflows and complete tasks without having humans click through menus like we're back in, I don't know, 2008, 2009. The key idea is that the interface is becoming optional. Imagine if your CRM system just updates itself, your procurement system negotiates contracts, and your customer support just resolves tickets on its own, all without you, all without the human intervention. Maybe not perfect at this time, maybe not completely universally, but increasingly that seems to be where we're heading to. So, what's the real product? Well, Control Frontier connects your data, your tools, your workflows, and then it assigns agents to run parts of the business with permissions, with audit trails, and to some degree with governance baked in already. Because the last thing a big company wants is, AI sort of freelancing its way into compliance violations. And this is where OpenAI, I think, is being pretty smart. So the bottleneck doesn't stay at intelligence anymore. It's more around coordination. Every company, or at least a lot of companies that I talk to, they've all got lots of AI pilots going on. A lot of them don't communicate with each other. Not many of them are actually scaling purposefully. And something I've been saying is it's sort of chaos with a budget. Frontier, I think, from OpenAI is sort of stepping in here and saying, look, let us organize this mess. We'll organize this mess. And if OpenAI succeed in this space, they will probably become even more indispensable. Follow the distribution for years. OpenAI has effectively been stapled to Microsoft. They've been pretty much in partnership with them. Azure was the pipe, if you like, and Microsoft was the partner, and the strategy was very much vertically integrated. That's changed a little bit. OpenAI, it's now pushing aggressively into Amazon Web Services. And what does that mean? Well, it's obviously where there's a lot of customers. AWS, we know it's the largest enterprise cloud platform in the world, probably at this stage. And if you want to become an infrastructure play, you can't stay exclusive. At some point, you've got to go everywhere. And that's a typical move. Microsoft provided a lot of oxygen when OpenAI needed it. But OpenAI will need more and more independence. And, I don't make any mistake when I say this, that will create a little bit of tension. Microsoft is building its own AI stack. It's pushing Copilot into every corner of its ecosystem. And OpenAI is effectively saying, we compete where we need to. And, that's not necessarily a partnership in the traditional sense as to where it's coming from, but it's more like co-opetition, but it has a timer sort of built in. And what's the $10 trillion question? Well, I think it's this, what's happened to SaaS? What's happened to software as a service? If agents can now operate systems directly, then the value of the interface to some degree declines and in some cases collapses. That dashboard that you spent millions on designing, it could become irrelevant if nobody logs into it. And that's not just, hypothetically, it's already starting in this new wave. A lot of software companies become infrastructure providers. Their APIs matter more than almost their UX. Their pricing power weakens a little bit. Their switching costs certainly shrink. Now, many of them will adapt, some won't. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see a little bit more destruction in this enterprise edition of where we're at now. So I think there's a couple of reasons and a couple of things playing out here. First, the models seem to be getting finally good enough. They're not perfect, but they're good enough to handle multiple step tasks, recover from errors, and operate with some degree of autonomy. And I think that threshold matters than, benchmarks, because the second point I want to put forward is that enterprises are a little bit desperate at the moment. They've spent the last 3 years experimenting with AI, and most of it hasn't scaled the way they wanted it to. Maybe it's been a recipe of too many tools, too many headlines, and not enough integration. When frustration, therefore, is high, but the budgets are still open, it's probably at the right time for OpenAI and Frontier because that's where the opportunity is. Look, Google is not sitting by either and just watching this happening. It's integrating AI into its cloud and its data stack. Microsoft is embedding it into software people already use. OpenAI is trying to sit above both, almost as the orchestration layer. Different strategies, probably the same goal. Who owns the future of work? Now, if I think about it a bit, maybe I'd lean towards the winner might not even be the company with the best model. Sometimes that's how it plays out. It might be the one who controls the distribution and the integration. So, right now, OpenAI is making a credible play for both of these scenarios. And what's the bottom line? Well, Frontier, it's a shift. Well, what's the bottom line? Frontier is a shift from software to systems, from tools to labor, and from traditional interfaces, maybe to outcomes. And if it works, if it changes how companies operate at a fundamental level, fewer clicks, fewer dashboards, fewer humans in the loop for routine work, and more power is therefore concentrated in whoever owns the layer that ultimately coordinates it all. That's probably the real story. Everything else, you might say, could just be branding. I hope that's been interesting.